Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 2 of the Sutta studies for the Rains Retreat 2023, working through the Eightfold Path in detail. So the topic today is a right view, and while it may, seem reasonably straightforward, in fact, a right view is very complex, primarily because if we're developing the Eightfold Path, right view is also being developed. If you remember that sequence I gave you about the 3 trainings, right view would condition the keeping of the precepts. Precepts provide a foundation for meditation. Meditation provides a foundation for wisdom. And the wisdom qualities, of course, are right view and right aspiration. So it gets recycled back to right view again, increasing clarity of right view, gives you more, incentive to refine the precepts, which leads to refined meditation, back to more wisdom again. So eventually you can say that right view probably evolves from at least some kind of initial right view, you say right enough to get us started on the path, and then it becomes more refined or more developed, and maybe your kind of a belief system. You believe it's what the Buddha taught is reasonable, so that's right. That's enough right view to proceed. But as you develop, you get more confidence, becomes more like conviction, and ultimately it arrives at full realization. And that's a kind of right view, if you like. In the scripture I gave you to read, the middle length sayings number 117, maybe you recall that it mentions 2 kinds of right view, right? Right, you read it? Right, you read the right view? Mundane right view and supermundane right view. All right? Well, supermundane right view is a complete realization. So probably we better start at the beginning, though, back to initial right view. But before we talk about right view, maybe it's better to talk about view in general. So the word in Pali for view, diti, is from the root to see. So fortunately, just like in English, when people say they see, there's 2 ways they can mean that. One is, of course, there's the external way of seeing. With your eyes, you see something. But it also is a metaphor for understanding, right? Somebody has some kind of realization or something. Oh, I see. I understand. So similar in the Pali, the view, we have a physical view, but we also have an internal view of things. And they're interrelated too. We look at the world, but you're looking at the world filtered through our own views and opinions, our own interpretation. And of course, in Buddhist psychology, most of that interpretation, what we see, is internal. It's in the mind. All the physical organ picks up is color and shape. And then the mind interprets that. The sanya gives you recognition of something, what it is. And then the sankhara, the mental activities, tell you what to do with it, with what you recognize or perceive. But behind that all, of course, there is an underlying particular biases. We see things in a particular way. Like the psychologists say that our personality is 50% DNA, 15% our early upbringing, the conditioning of our early upbringing, and 35% of the decisions you make the rest of your life. So at the very least, we when many of us are, say, mature enough to think for ourselves, we still have 65% conditioning from our past. The DNA we have little control over, no control over actually, DNA. We inherit that from our parents and their grandparents and, et cetera, et cetera. 15% of your early childhood upbringing, very little control over. You have very little control over whether you're born into a loving family or a violent family or rich family, poor family. Not much you can do except just react to it. And that creates a certain conditioning in our psyche, in our personality. And then it comes to the 35% where we have some degree of choice, just some degree, because it's already, we have no free choice because it's already 65% conditioned. But we can go with that conditioning if you like, or we can try to work against it and change our personality, which of course is what the whole purpose of the Buddha's teaching is, that we can work on ourselves, and our right view, rather than being a distorted view in the beginning, can become more right, to the point of view of having ultimately perfect view of the Arahant. So it is basically the view we have is our outlook on the world. And unfortunately, most people don't even realize that they have already a conditioned outlook on the world. They don't realize that you have are you a, what do they say, the glass half full person or the glass half empty person? Or maybe you're 50-50. But people bring this with them to their whole life. So then they try to make a choice about things, and then it's half empty. Like it's hopeless. I can't do much about it. Or it's half full. Oh yeah, right. I only got halfway to go now. A very positive attitude about it, and it can generate more energy and do something more positive then. So I'm aware, the Buddha was aware of this, I think, I would say, since the Buddha was the one who, discovered a way to enlightenment, so he must have known the internal workings of human beings. But it also was on the time in the time of the Buddha in India, there was lots of views around, views and opinions, just like there is today. There's all kinds of different, ways to find the truth, ways to live your life. I mean, you just have to look in one of these newspapers here, and there's all kinds of promises how to get more healthy and be happier and more successful, and but if you have to read some of them, I do sometimes when I light my fire, As I'm bunching up the paper, I have a glance at it too. And quite a few of them, they mention the value of meditation. Now too, it's beginning to become a little bit more mainstream meditation practice. So at least we're on the right path already, to be popular anyway. Popular trends. Maybe the whole world is moving towards right view. Huh? About time now. About time for it. But just knowing that we have those views, and unfortunately, just like we can't see our eyes, for many of us, it's very hard to see our internal views. Hard to know what kind of attitude we bring to spiritual practice. And there's all kinds of, like I say, there's all kinds of views, which maybe we'll hear about eventually. I don't know how much detail I'll go into it. But anyway, then we come to, say, right view. And if you remember what you read in the passage I mentioned, the Buddha gave he gave a detailed explanation of what he considered to be right view. Remember the 6 points? Huh? When did you read that? Huh? Already forgotten? Anyway, the Buddha explained mundane right view. There is what is offered, what is bestowed, and what is sacrificed, which means there is result of what is offered and bestowed or given. There is fruit and result of good and bad actions. There is this world and the other world, which means that there is, Buddha is really saying that there's, according to the commentaries anyway, there is this world, and then there is another world you can be reborn into. This is not the end of it. There is mother and father. There is mother and father that you should respect, pay respects to, and honor. There are beings born spontaneously. This is, the one suggestion is, what that means is that in the Buddhist cosmology, if you're interested, there are so-called beings that are born, or they're only mind only. They exist only in mind. They say some of the higher celestial beings, they have no physical body, so they don't have to go through the time-bound process of being born physically. They're in their mind, they just appear. And then there are, in this world, religious people who are practicing rightly, who have followed the right path and practiced rightly, who've realized direct knowledge of this world and the other world and make it known. So this is maybe sound a little bit strange, these different views here. What the Buddha says is the right view, but I mentioned before about in the Pali Canon we come across stock phrases sometimes. So this is just really an answer to one of the wrong views the Buddha criticized in the Digha Nikaya, the second discourse. Starts off by, who is it? Is it King Pasenadi, I think, goes to different teachers. There were traditionally, they refer to the 6 teachers of different sect. And this Pasenadi, King Pasenadi goes to them and he asks these different teachers, what's the right way to practice? And they all come up with different views. So it shows, it's just a way maybe of showing the variety. There's annihilationists. This one is the view of the nihilist. He's denying that there is any benefit from doing it to him, from making any offerings or sacrifices, from doing anything good in the world. You wonder why then he would even be a religious person then, actually. If there's no purpose in being a religious person, why be the one, huh? live an ascetic life. Anyway, this is a direct refuting of that view anyway. Those exact same words. But the Buddha is saying generally, if you summarize all that, I would say that the most general right view then is to believe in the principle of karma, the law of karma, of causality, ethical causality. There is benefit, fruit and result of good and bad actions. So the principle of karma, especially the following the guideline that good actions give pleasant results and unskillful actions give unpleasant results. You have some kind of, at least a belief in that anyway, that allows you to appreciate the value of precepts, for example. If you recognize, if you believe anyway, just believe that if I kill somebody, it's going to have a bad result, then I refrain from it. Or if I recognize that instead of killing somebody, if I'm generous to people rather than trying to get rid of them, then it has a positive effect. But maybe in the beginning, I was reflecting on my own early journey, and I wasn't a Buddhist. Well, maybe I was. Didn't realize it. No. I remember being at university, and this the census taker came around, and then they took the census, and then they asked, okay, what's your religion? And I couldn't. Are you a Christian? No. Are you a Muslim? No. Are you a Hindu? No. What are you then? I guess I'm a Buddhist. That was the only sensible answer I could come up with. Don't think you know how to spell it in those days, 50 years ago. But I realized that the Buddhist teachings was the closest, I would say, came the closest to my own belief system. It sounded reasonable, and I think I'd already had been in Sri Lanka maybe already by then. So I knew a bit about it. So just having some initial, even if it's just a belief system, I didn't really, wasn't really convinced of it yet, but I saw the value of it, keeping the precepts, living a good life, being more, being more morally inclined, even though I couldn't always do it. And then, of course, that provides a stable foundation for developing meditation practice. And I realized the value of having to work on the mind. Especially being from at the university, they very much depends upon how you think. And of course, if your thoughts are really clouded by confusion and doubt and all this and worry, then you can't even read the text anymore. Or sometimes I try to read a textbook and you read one line and then what's back again. You realize my mind was wandering off into fantasies of the future and past memories and can't even focus on it anymore. Yeah. So I realized I need some concentration. I need some focus. Yeah. So off to Asia for 10 years. So the Buddha said, probably the most common, he mentioned a few other things, like the Buddha, compared to these other 6 teachers. He said that he was a teacher. He taught the doctrine of karma, of deeds and of energy. That means that, our action gives a result and that you can do something about it. If you do good action, put energy into good action, you get pleasant results then. He was somebody who believed in the effectiveness of doing actions, doing skillful actions. There is causality. Some of these, there's no result of doing good actions. They don't believe in causality then. So the Buddha was he was a karma yogi, if you like. he was at that school of thought then. And that's the way he was able to realize awakening. So that's the particular beneficial foundation for spiritual practice to develop the Buddhist path. And then the most common expression of right view in the Pali Canon, when somebody asks about right view, the most common reference he gives is understanding the Four Noble Truths, which also includes, the Four Noble Truths include the understanding of the principle of causality. There is a cause of suffering, then there is once you remove the cause, there's a solution to it then. But there's also, of course, in the Four Noble Truths, there's a recognition of unsatisfactoriness. People can believe in, even most religions, I think, believe in causality to some degree, right? You do good, you go to heaven. You do bad, you go down to the lower realms, But do they recognize the extent of unsatisfactoriness? That's sort of like a little bit of an extra incentive. They say, Buddha said, that's the teaching of Buddhas, the Four Noble Truths. There is unsatisfactoriness, there is a cause, there's a cessation, and there is a path to follow. Teaching particular to the Buddhas. So, and then we come to right view, and then there's also the refinement of that, understanding the Four Noble Truths. I mean, to understand it just literally or technically is one thing, but to put it into practice before you have to realize the result of the path before you can become totally convinced of it. You have to know that, oh yes, if I do develop the Eightfold Path, I realize the cessation of suffering then. Becomes the super mundane right view then. And I should mention maybe that there is in that same text, Middle Length Sayings, number 9, there's a sutta called Right View. But specifically, I didn't mention that yet because it's about super mundane right view. So if you feel you're close to that, you can look at it. The benefit, I guess, is realizing that it shows that you can realize, awakening through a huge variety of different methods. It basically goes through what's called the dependent origination, just realizing one of them. Realizing the ignorance, the cessation of ignorance, based upon the Four Noble Truths. So right view also, it said it arises from two conditions: the word of another or appropriate attention. So for some people, they maybe come to some kind of initial right view, just like, say, the story of Venerable Sariputta in the Buddhist time. He was already a practicing ascetic, but he was a disciple of one of these founders of one of these other sect, the so-called skeptic sect. But when he saw Venerable Assaji, one of the first of the disciples to be enlightened, first of the 5 disciples, he was taken by his demeanor. This Venerable Assaji was very controlled, he seemed to be very, very peaceful and very serene, walking alms round. So Venerable Sariputta asked him what he taught. He said, "Well, I'm a disciple of the recluse, the Gotama. What does he teach?" And he just said, "Well, he's a new disciple, but he said, he teaches, whatever rises passes away." Yeah. So you're teaching him causality in a very, very simple thing. And of course, like the skeptic, maybe the skeptics look at things, nothing is real, nothing, you can't believe anything. But when Sariputta heard, things arise and things pass away. Right, causality. That's what I missed. At that moment, he was awakened. First, to become a sotapanna, as they say, at that moment. Just by hearing those few words. I think it was just 4 lines he heard, and then he was, right. He was all ready for it. That's the value of the word of another. Of course, it can be dangerous because many people there's so many words out there right now. Or also it can come from appropriate attention. So if people are attending, like some people, maybe they just have, I would say there are people who have moments of insight. Like when they have, especially on something like extreme sports. Some people are trekking in nature and they have a moment of clarity. It's when their mind stops. It's a moment of deep collectedness or samadhi. And then maybe it dawns on them, there's another world out there, another way of seeing things. Maybe they realize, I think some people also have this experience have drug experiences too. And then they realize, but now I have to find a path to follow. Okay, I've had a glimpse of another reality, an altered state of consciousness maybe for a moment, but then it vanishes. Either from the drug wearing off, or they change their environment and they go back home again and forget all about it. But then they have some initial thought, I maybe have to find some way to practice that I can, encourage that or increase that, rather than just have it as a one-off experience. So the Buddha was always open to, somebody developing in different ways, developing the Eightfold Path, developing right view, but then it needs to be cultivated in the right environment. So in that scripture, I think hopefully you remember, it mentions how right view comes first, then it conditions right intention, right aspiration. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi translated as right intention. I use a translation for sankappa as aspiration. And then follows on development of the precepts, morality, and then as a foundation for meditation practice. Then, so if we keep developing the path like this, there's some people maybe they just get satisfied at a certain level and they stop. They go, yes, I have right view now. I'm a Buddhist. I'm safe. I'll go to heaven next lifetime. No guarantee. You never know if your view is not, totally confirmed. You don't have direct experience. Last minute you can have doubts. Yeah, doubt is one of the hindrances that last to pass away. You see, so at the last minute you can practice your whole life as a Buddhist, thinking you're being very devoted, and the last minute you hear, is that right? Oops. So it's always it's a bit uncertain still, So until your view is perfect, you're convinced of it. You have confidence then in it. And you can maybe realize, like I mentioned, that it's hard for people to know their own view, but sometimes it can be helpful to either, on one hand, to look at other views, be informed of them, and see if you agree or not. Yeah. For example, the views the Buddha criticized the most were called annihilationism and eternalism. So eternalism was that there's a persistence after the death of the body. Annihilationism is that nothing persists. Yeah. But both of them are based upon the wrong view that there is something, there is a self that continues, or a self that's destroyed, annihilated, you can say. But how many Buddhists are eternalists? Huh? I'm going to go to heaven next lifetime, right? Yes, you are. Who are you that goes to heaven next lifetime? That's always, there's always one of those, anyway, those questions people ask you. If it's all is empty, who's enlightened? Already the wrong question. You're already saying who. It means it already implies there is somebody, you see. You say, what's enlightened? Enlightenment is there when you are not. But maybe most of us are so caught up with ourselves, of course, our self-view, that we immediately assume that it's still me getting enlightened, or me going to Nibbana, or whatever. So the Buddha also pointed out not only right view, but how to relate to views, which is a real test of our development, I would say. Because one of the suttas, he also said, this is the Buddha explained about right view and the Buddhist approach to practice. He said, as clear and pure as this view is, if you adhere to it, take pride in it, treasure it, cherish it, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as being like a raft, for the sake of crossing over, not for the sake of acquiring? So we can't even hang on to right view, boy. It's getting serious. Then, of course, in the simile of the raft, which is in also, when you understand that the Dhamma has been taught as being like a raft, for the sake of crossing over, not for the sake of acquiring, you should give up the Dhamma. How much more so what is not Dhamma? Okay, that's more advanced teaching, right? Stick to right view first. Stick with it for a while, until you can recognize, it becomes, you can say, it gets so internalized, I would say, so much, part of your outlook on the world, that you don't need to keep holding on to it. Like they say, the enlightened beings see the world totally differently than we do. Different perspective on the world. There was somebody who did some psychological tests on some of the, they call them, like the ajahns, the teachers in Burma, apparently. Some Burmese masters. They did, I don't know if you know what the Rorschach ink blot tests are. They just give you this ink blot, and then people are supposed to say what they see there. It's not supposed to be any picture at all, just a blot, you see. But of course, it reminds people of, brings up sort of, unconscious images to people. It's a butterfly, it's a whatever it is, it's a tree or something or other, And then they when they were doing this to these ajahns, the Burmese teachers, every one of them explained some aspect of Dhamma when they saw. They only saw Dhamma in it. They didn't see butterflies, they didn't see trees, they just saw Dhamma things, symbols. Maybe they saw a Bodhi tree rather than a tree, or something. I don't know. But all they saw was some kind of, oh, that shows impermanence. That's a very very strong image of suffering or something, or dukkha or something or other. They only saw Dhamma in it. Their mind became just so changed from their deep practice. They didn't see the world like everybody else does. They just saw Dhamma everywhere. So there are different levels, of course, this relates to, and sometimes, for example, people can read about the Buddhist teachings. They can have some kind of lots of knowledge about it, lots of information, knowledge about it, and they can kind of think in the Buddhist type way, but then maybe they're still deep rooted, unconscious issues deep within them. They still have certain traumas in life or something, traumas from early life or something or other, that hasn't been really affected by that. So there are cases, of course, where there are people who have quite a bit of insight, but they also have maybe psychological problems. Just like it depends on the level of where these insights, what level of insight or what level of your psyche the insight has been able to touch. So that's why I find Ajahn Chah's teaching about trying to develop the practice in everyday life so valuable, because it's easy to be a Buddhist when you're sitting in a meditation hall, even when it's cold maybe. But it's not always to be a Buddhist when you're out there relating to the world, relating to other people. But if you can sustain some degree of mindfulness and collectedness, then you'll be able to use that, recognize that. Oh, here's an opportunity now. There's something has been triggered off, which wouldn't get triggered in a formal meditation environment, because we don't even know it, but we assume, as soon as we walk through the door, we assume maybe a Buddhist persona, you see. And it's set up that way. It's set up to create a certain environment in your mind. When I was in New Zealand, there's the meditation hall in New Zealand is a very impressive building or something. That's a bit overused, but it's a very strong religious effect upon people, put it that way. And I was showing these because it's a big forest monastery, big forest area, we get sometimes people coming in to go for walks around the monastery, you see. So this walking group asked to come. And then I met them before they started walking around to explain the situation to them. And it's a monastery, and not a lot of talking, and don't play your radios and stuff, Anyways, and one of them said, "Oh, I would like to see your hall. Can I see your hall?" She said, "But I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. Don't try and convert me. In other words." He said, "No, it's not our job to do that." So she said, "Oh, can I have a look at the hall?" So I took her up to the hall and opened the hall, and she just stopped. This is a spiritual place," she said. Didn't go in and bow to the Buddha. She just recognized that this was a very powerful, presence about the place. It's a square building already. Square buildings already have a certain ability to change your mind, set your mind in a peaceful environment, apparently. And just the way it was, very simple. There's no pews there. just the plain wooden floor, and just the dynamics of the place, and, which is what the many of the churches or cathedrals in Europe also do, or any kind of dominant religious building, I guess, not just cathedrals but mosques and whatever. Wherever you go there, Hindu temples, they're set up in a way to create a certain space where people can already assume, as it were, kind of a spiritual attitude. If you go in there, you recognize that it's not Woolies or Coles, isn't it? Yes, yeah. Not a place to go shopping. No, anyway. But at the same time, well, it can expose people to that state of mind, and which is all within them. Some people, they don't recognize, they think, oh, it's the place, rather than recognizing the place was the trigger to set off something within you see. The same when I lived in Switzerland, people go to the mountains to look at the beautiful scenery, But, from my point of view, it was, when you see this spectacular scenery, your mind just stops. And it's actually a samadhi experience. They think it's the place that does it, but the place is just a trigger, and it creates this, it's so awe-inspiring that you just can't think anymore. Your mind just stops, and they have a moment of a deep meditative experience. Like I say, even a moment of beyond all their thoughts and their confusion and whatever. And then it's for a moment, and then, oh, get out the camera. I got to capture this place. Of course, it's not the image. It's that what was triggered off inside you. I should put leave a brochure up there, After this, come to the monastery for meditation practice to deepen your your samadhi experience. But not too many come. But they still prefer the hard work of climbing the mountain rather than sitting there in a nice, peaceful environment, But I don't get the point yet. But once people have recognized there is that possibility within, then it's a matter of, finding the right environment to be able to cultivate it. And fortunately, the Buddha's given us that path, the Eightfold Path to follow. It's a matter of trying to put these different, you can say internal or psychological qualities together. Morality, is creating a right, wholesome state of mind that you don't feel resentment, you don't feel guilt, you don't feel worry about things, your behavior, and then create the right meditative environment, awareness, collectedness. And when those qualities come together, then the path happens, the path exists. Then there is the realization can come out of it then. It's a matter of trying to cultivate these various qualities together, just like, making in the cooking, got to put the right ingredients together to get the right flavor, So I put them all together, and there's 8 factors, not too many, I think, not too many, but enough to keep you busy for a little while, I think. So ideally, one of the tests is, if right view is developing. Like I say, maybe in the beginning, it's only a belief system, something you believe. I think I started off by recognizing that the Buddhist teaching is reasonable. It's all logical and reasonable. There's no talk about some kind of mysterious being somewhere else, at least the stuff I read anyway, that you have to believe in. You got all the tools with you right now, just do it, cause and effect. I already knew about cause and effect because I studied about chemistry and physics, based on the law of cause and effect. And so it all made sense. Oh yeah. But to put into practice now, that was the other thing. And there was very little possibility around in my environment at that time, so I had to go and look, go to Asia to find the right environment for it. But really all those qualities are within us. Sometimes it's easier to find some of those qualities within. Other times you might need, like it says there, the word of somebody else. Like we have the Pali Canon available to us. We need the other voices to add to our own. We have our own doubts or confusion, and to be able to study it in more detail, knowing a little more the details of what right view is, just to say, believing in cause and effect, but applying that now to our own activities, our own actions, observing what we say, what we do, what we think, and see if we can observe the effects of it, the cause and effect relationship directly, rather than just believe that, yeah, this will happen, but we don't know it yet. We don't see it directly. So ideally, right view, it's just from a belief system, it becomes more confirmed. Aha, right. If I do this, I can see that result there. If I follow these guidelines, after a while, I notice my mind settles down, calms down, because I'm not worried about, saying something wrong. I've been able to cultivate right speech, and right action. But when we see the results ourselves, this belief becomes more conviction then, until eventually, it provides the right foundation for deeper insights, be able to have a direct insight of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no permanent self. And we can realize that we eventually get maybe glimpses of, you can say super mundane right view, just glimpses, not yet the real deep insights yet, but oh yes, right, becoming clearer and clearer to me, coming into focus now. So for right view, as that scripture says, right view is right view. It all starts with right view first. Right view is the beginning, and it begins to also condition the other factors in the right way. So hopefully that'll be clear enough to you, and you can continue with that and see. We go on to the next theme next time, right aspiration.